الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My name is Muhammad. Inshallah, today the purpose of having this event, which is a workshop, is, as we know, in the month of Ramadan, the Muslim community in the UK mainly distribute or give the zakat during this month of Ramadan. Mainly give the zakat in the month of Ramadan, and so because of that, sometimes we have many questions, sometimes it's looked at as a very complicated subject, and so hopefully today the purpose is that we can go through some of this, understanding first of all why we have zakat, the importance of zakat, as well as looking at the more practical side of how do we actually calculate it, what things do we have to consider, and looking at the distribution of it as well in terms of where it actually goes. So to start off, I want to go back all the way to the first kind of Islamic state, as you would say, when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Madinatul Munawwara after the torture and the difficulties they went through over the period of 10 to 13 years. And Rasulullah migrated to Medina. After Rasulullah migrated, at the time he mentioned a hadith, and this is a very famous hadith. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the foundation of Islam, the foundation of this religion, is on 5 things. And those 5 things are that, and this is the hadith from which we get our famous 5 pillars of Islam. And so Rasulullah mentioned that these 5 things is the foundation of this religion. First, Shahada, Salah, Zakah, Sawm, and Hajj. These 5 Rasulullah mentioned. Now you see, when you look at these 5 pillars, when you look at it, usually majority of the time when you look at it, you think of these as these are acts of worship which is between a person and his creator. Shahada, your belief, it's something between you and your creator. Your salah, when you're praying your salah, right, it's a personal conversation between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're fasting, right, as we know, in the month of Ramadan, we're fasting, it's between a person and Allah. Nobody knows whether you're fasting or not. Right? I'm saying I'm fasting, but I could have had a nice breakfast in the morning. Nobody knows. Right? So it's something which is between a person and Allah. When we go for Hajj, again, it's a spiritual journey where you try to become closer to Allah. So when you look at all of them, it seems as though they are kind of a person's personal relationship and spiritual relationship with his creator. But Rasulullah is saying that this is actually the foundation of our religion. It goes much beyond a person's own relationship and his own spiritual development. And that is because each one of these contributes not just to a person's personal relationship and his spirituality, but also the development of society as well. How is that? Is through Shahada we create a concept of Ummah. Right? The way we have nationalities. Our nationality as Muslims is La ilaha illallah. That is our nationality. That is who we are as an Ummah. So it's bringing that first of all. Salah. Yes, it's a person's kind of speech with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But through Salah we are encouraged, and we are we end up developing the masajid. Because essentially that is where we come to pray in congregation. And then these masajid become a center for the community. When you look at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the masjid wasn't just a place where you came for reading your salah. It was a place that would be the university, it was a college, it was a school, it was a hotel, it was a court, it was everything, right? Because it was a center of that community. So through salah we provide that space for the community. Then when you look at fasting, again when you look at fasting in the month of Ramadan specifically, the amount the Muslim community socializes, we probably don't do in the whole year, right? It's bringing that community together. Hajj as well, similar thing. And this is where zakat comes in. That zakat, yes, it's a person is purifying his own wealth, but it's much more than that. Zakat is about developing your community. It's about ensuring that those that are less fortunate within our community, we are there to support them. And so you see in the Quran, there's around about 28 places, I believe, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that you should be praying your salah, gives the command of salah, and straight away mentions zakat. And out of those 20, there's one verse that really sticks out for myself. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. See, in this verse, why I said it really sticks out for myself, is that in this verse, Allah says, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمْ. Allah is saying that, you see, every person as humans, we're going to go through difficulties, we're going to go through challenges. So Allah is saying, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمْ. In those situations, your friends, or should I say, your helpers, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمْ, your walis, your friends, your helpers, your close people, are who? Straight to Allah says first, Allah. Then, وَرَسُولُهُ, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the third category that Allah mentions, that your friends or your helpers are who? The believers. And so how do we get that help from Allah, His Rasul and the believers? Allah says, الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. That when you pray your salah, you're attracting the help of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You're attracting that help. So you're getting help from Allah through your salah. And how do we get the help from our community, from the believers? Is وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ, is through that zakat. So that's the whole concept of zakat. Is there for us to use to develop our community. And so that's why it's quite important to actually learn about this and understand the whole concept of zakat. So coming on to more sort of the practical parts in terms of exactly what is zakat and how do we look at zakat. So first and foremost is, as I was saying, the purpose of zakat is to help the community. It's there to alleviate poverty. It's there to help those who are going through a difficult time. Zakat has not been stipulated so that it makes life difficult for us. That I give zakat and then I become poor. It's actually something which is amazing, and we'll look at it a bit later on. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He stipulated zakat, it wasn't just a matter of once you've got wealth, you just give a certain percentage of it. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made zakat compulsory only on certain aspect of a person's wealth. And what those aspects are is something which we like to call growing wealth. Something which, if you take a little bit out of it, it wouldn't make a difference because it's going to keep growing. Right? And that's what Allah has kind of... It's like, for example, if somebody comes to you and says, brother, I've got a problem with my kidney, I need a kidney transplant, and they ask for a donation of a kidney. Once that kidney is taken out, will it grow back again? No, right? Once it's gone, it's gone. You'll never be able to replace that. So you see, our basic necessities are like that. Where Allah says, I don't want those things. The house that you're living in, no, zakat. The car that you're driving for work, no need for that. The clothes that you wear on a daily basis, no need. The jewelry, the other things that you might use on a daily basis, no, there's no need. The only thing we're going to ask for is that which is growing, continues to grow. Now, take another example. If somebody doesn't have hair, right? The hair doesn't grow, and they want a hair transplant and they need a donation of hair for it. Here, I'm not talking about whether it's permissible or not. That's something you can ask your local imams. But if somebody comes and says, brother, look, I've got no hair, it's not growing, I'm going to get transplant done, I need a donation of hair. Mine isn't it? So it doesn't matter, clip off, 3-4 sizes, 3-4 centimeters of hair, no problem. Why? Because our hair is going to grow back again. That is what zakat is. It's like that hair, because even if we clip a little bit off it, it doesn't matter because it's going to grow back again. Right? And that's what we consider zakat on, is those things which are continuing to grow. So within our economy, what do we classify as growing wealth? Because there's 4 things in our economy that we consider as growing wealth. 1, money. So any type of cash, any type of currency. Second and third is gold and silver. So up until quite recent, gold and silver was considered a currency and was used as a currency. Within the Islamic concept, gold and silver is still classified as a currency, and so you have gold and silver. And the fourth is trade stock. So things that you purchase to resell. So I bought this chair because it was a bargain for £10, whereas I know the market value of that is £30, so I'm going to sell it for £30. So this is things like trade stock, just as an example. And so when we look at even a lot of the modern things that come into place, for example, cryptocurrencies, investments, shares and stuff, we're going to look at these in a bit more detail, but all of them have to somehow link in one of these four. And only if they link in one of these four do they then be considered as wealth which zakat is due upon. So these four are what we call zakatable assets, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, so that's first of all, to make it easy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we don't want your personal things, it's just those things which will continue to grow, which you can continue to develop. That's the first thing. So Allah already has stipulated something which will save a person from becoming, from kind of falling into poverty himself. The second thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is that it's not straight away that, okay, I've got all my basic necessities, and then after that I've only got £100 spare. And now you give zakat on that? No. Again, to make it easy, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stipulated a threshold. That after all your basic necessities, once you save up a certain amount, only then zakat becomes compulsory. So again, you see, at each stage, it's making it easier. And so what that stipulation is, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stipulated approximately about 82 grams of gold and about 612 grams of silver. So in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the value of both of those was equal. It was the same. So it didn't really matter which threshold you used. In today's day and age, it's very different. As you know, about 82 grams of gold is about £4,500, whereas about 612 grams of silver is only about £360. So there's a huge difference between that. So usually the scholars of the area of the place that you're living in, they usually then will decide which threshold we should use. So in the UK, majority of the charities as well as majority of the scholars use the silver threshold. So as long as anybody has the silver threshold, then they have to pay zakat on that. So that's the second thing, right? So it's not a matter of as soon as you've got even £100, it's you have to have a minimum threshold for zakat to be compulsory upon you. Now, that's again something there. Now, another thing which becomes, again, Allah is making it easy for us, is that now the question is, okay, I've got the threshold, but do I give zakat straight away? No. So again, you see, each step Allah is making it easy. Allah and Rasul are making it easy. So what Allah has done is that you only pay zakat once you hold that nisab for a year. If you don't have it for a year, then there's no zakat. Right? So the first time ever, let's say for example, I've never worked before, or I don't have any debts or anything of that sort. My first wage slip came, don't really have any expenses, and alhamdulillah, I'm above the threshold. Now it's not straight away that now give zakat straight away. No, Allah says, relax. You've just gone above. You've just about reached that stage. Now wait for a full year. And only once you reach the end of the year and you're still above the threshold, then you give your zakat. An example of that is, by the way, when we refer to us here, we're talking about the Islamic lunar year. And that's the reason why majority of people use the month of Ramadan, because it's easy to know when Ramadan comes. Otherwise, if I ask when was the month of Safar last, we wouldn't know. So usually that's the reason why people usually use Ramadan. Otherwise, there's no concept that all your zakat has to be in the month of Ramadan. Zakat is as soon as it becomes compulsory, but you give it straight away. So an example to understand this the lunar year, we've put an example on the screen. Apologies, yourselves can't see on this side. So on the screen there's an example that the nisab value is £380, right? That's the threshold. That's the threshold that you need to reach. So in this example, I'm going to use the English months just to so that it's easier to understand. So here we have, let's say, the month of January 2024. Right? January 2024, you are below the threshold. So zakat hasn't yet come upon you. It was only in February 21st of February 2024 that you finally went above that threshold. That now is the first time I've reached a threshold where I have enough money where zakat can become compulsory upon me. So that 1st of February 2024 is essentially your zakat anniversary date. You can pretty much say that, yeah, your zakat anniversary date. So now, that's the first time you went above that threshold. Now, all you'll do is, you'll have to just keep in mind, 1st of February is my zakat anniversary. So now what you'll do is, that's the first time you went above, you don't pay zakat then. What you will do is, you will wait until the 1st of February 2025, and on that day, you will calculate all your zakatable assets, and if you're above the threshold, only then you pay your zakat. So in this example, when 1st of February 2025 came, you had £400, that's above the threshold, so then you give 2.5% off that. So as you can see, in the middle, you had, you went kind of higher and a little bit lower, etc. The middle doesn't really matter. So we don't need to focus on every month where I am. Just remember your zakat anniversary date, and that's it. So even, for example, somebody actually asked me this question yesterday. I was dealing with someone else yesterday. Somebody asked a question that, imagine that I only just about went the threshold, and then I was up and down, up and down, up and down, and literally just a day before somebody gifted me £10,000. Do I have to give zakat on the £10,000? I said, yes, you do. Because when your zakat anniversary date came, you're above the threshold. So just keep that in mind, inshallah. The other example is, this is the other example. Same. In February was the first time you went above the threshold, you were quite high. But when your zakat anniversary date came, on the 1st of February 2025, you were below the threshold, so zakat is not compulsory. So what you will do in this situation is, you'll then wait until you go above the nisab again, and then your zakat anniversary date will restart. So for example, 1st of February 2025, zakat was not now compulsory upon me. Then March came, April came, right, May, June. It was finally in the month of June that I went above the nisab again. So that's when now your year starts again. So then you'll wait till the 1st of June 2026 to see whether you still have the nisab. So it's a very easy concept that Islam's given, that it's not a matter of putting people into difficulty. So that's the kind of only due once a year. Now the question you usually get is, we don't know when the first time I ever went above the nisab threshold. So just make an estimate, just take a guess. Nowadays it's a bit easy, we have access to bank statements from years and years ago. So it's sometimes easy to just have a quick look and make an estimate that maybe, okay, the 1st of Safar is when my zakat anniversary date is, and then you just stick to that over the years. Does zakat time out? So this is a question that sometimes comes in, that I didn't know that I have to give zakat. I thought the nisab threshold was £1,000, and I've always had about £800-900. So I didn't know I had to give zakat. So because zakat is the right of somebody else, it belongs, essentially the zakat wealth that we have that needs to be given, it now belongs to somebody. It's not our wealth anymore. It's the right of somebody else. So it doesn't time out. So if a person hasn't paid zakat for a number of years for whatever reason, then they still have to calculate those years and pay that. Otherwise, they would be sinful for that, for not fulfilling that zakat. And now, this is another question that we get, is that I know my zakat anniversary date is the 1st of Safar, for example. Right? Let's just say Ramadan. 1st of Ramadan is my anniversary date. But what happened was, a few months ago, there was an earthquake somewhere, and a charity came to the masjid for donations, and I gave a £500 donation. And then so on the 1st of Ramadan, when I'm sitting there calculating my zakat, I just remember, actually 4 months ago I gave a £500 donation towards a cause. I'll just put that as zakat. So with zakat, just keep in mind that you have to make the intention of zakat. Otherwise, any donation you make will not classify as zakat unless you make that intention of it being zakat. So whenever you are making that payment of zakat, just make sure you make that intention that this is specifically zakat. You don't have to tell the person you're giving it to, it's just you yourself need to know that this is zakat. So sometimes it does happen that somebody might want to give it to a relative of theirs without telling them it's zakat. That's fine, but as long as you have intended it for it to be zakat. And one of the things which usually the sisters kind of love, this bottom one, is someone else can pay your zakat for you on your behalf. So, mashallah, the wife owns all the gold, but you're going to pay the zakat on it. So obviously the the responsibility is on whoever owns the item. But if, for example, the husband says, "Don't worry, I'll pay for it. I'll pay the zakat," they can do. But again, the important part is you have to take their permission and they have to authorize you to give zakat on their behalf. So, how are we going to calculate all these zakatable assets? I mean, it's easy to say, just count your money, count your gold, count your thing. But how do we actually do it practically? So first of all, what we're going to do is, this is the very simple formula of calculating the zakat, which I think majority of people will know. Is, first of all, you're going to sum up all your zakatable assets. Do you remember what the zakatable assets are? Money, gold, silver, and trade stock, right? So those four things, you're going to add all those up. So let's say I've added all mine up, £10,000. Then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to minus any liabilities of mine. So liabilities are, we're going to look at what the liabilities are, but you minus your liabilities. And then whatever is left, so my liabilities was £5,000. So whatever that's left is your net zakatable asset. So for me, in this example, 10,000 minus 5,000, I'm left with £5,000. Now, if that net zakatable asset is above the threshold, so 5,000 is above the threshold, then I will give 2.5% of the £5,000 into zakat. That's the very basic. Now, going into details on that, how are we going to add up the money? So money, doesn't matter how many bank accounts you have. So if you've got multiple bank accounts, add up all the amounts in each one. Any cash that you might have at home, right, whether it's under a mattress or whatever it may be, you can add all that up. You know, believe it or not, I was at somebody's house. This was last Ramadan. They invited me for iftar, and I went to the house, and subhanallah, the brother had hidden his money inside the curtain railings. And I was like, subhanallah, you know, people come up with ajib places where to, you know, to hide their cash and stuff. I was thinking, I hope it just falls and say it came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But anyway, so all the cash that you have, it doesn't matter what currency is. You might have, you know, you might have come back from Pakistan, so you've got rupees. You might have gone for Umrah. You've got some riyals, or you might have gone holiday somewhere else. You have to calculate all that, add it all up. So easiest way is convert it all to pounds, and then add all that up. Then what you will do is, then you will add on any money that's owed to you. So where you may have, somebody may have come to you and said, brother, look, I'm going through a difficult time. Can I borrow some money off you? Now, when we say money owed to you, we're referring to that money where you have hope of it coming back. You know, sometimes you give money to somebody and you know you're never going to see that again. So we're not talking about that type of money. Talk about money where you know the person will give it back, whether it's after 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, whatever it may be, you know the person is going to give it back. So we're talking about that kind of money that's owed to you. So that also has to be calculated in your zakat. But with that type of money that you don't have in your possession at that moment, the Sharia has given two options for you. The two options is, what you can do is, every year you just calculate it in your calculation as we're doing now, and you just pay the zakat. And so after, let's say 3 years, when the person finally gives it to you, you just keep it and spend it however you like. Or the other option is, you every year you calculate it and you just make a note that, okay, this year I need to pay this much zakat on that amount, and you just keep making a note until the person finally gives it to you. When the person gives it to you after 3 years, you'll just see what the note was. Oh, okay, year one I had, for example, £30 to pay on that, year two I had £20, year three I had £30 to pay on that, just as an example. So then you calculate the total, and from that what is given you, you just give the zakat, and then you keep the rest. So you have that option there. Sometimes, you know, people like, I know we'll give it, but I'm not sure. So best is usually just make a note, and then when they give it, you just pay at that time. So there is that flexibility with money that's owed to you. But this also needs to be calculated in. So that's the money and cash that we're adding up. Now we're going to add up the gold and silver. So when it comes to gold and silver, there's a bit of a difference between the different fiqh school of thoughts. So according to the Hanafi school of thought, it doesn't matter for what purpose you bought that gold or silver. So even if it's something that you use for your personal self, or your, you know, the wife has the bangles or chains or whatever, necklaces or whatever it may be, it all has to be counted in. Doesn't matter what, you know, what purpose it's bought for. Whereas the other schools of thought, the Hanbali, Maliki and the Shafi'i school of thought, they said that gold and silver, if it's for personal use, you don't calculate that into your zakat because that's for personal use. So there's that difference. So whichever school you follow, you can kind of take that. But when you do gold and silver, then the value that we use is scrap value. So if your wife got, for example, a bracelet, it might be worth £1,000. But when you go to the jeweler, ask the jeweler how much would they buy this for, they might say, I'll only pay you £800 for it. So it is that £800 value that we use, so which is a scrap value, i.e. the value that a jeweler will buy it from. So that's the value that we use for gold and silver. So we add with the cash, let's get the value of the gold and silver that we have, we add that in, and then we come on to the last part is the trade stock. So trade stock is anything you purchase with the intention of reselling, and it's on market. So as earlier I was saying, that I bought this chair for £10 because it was a bargain, and I'm going to sell that off for £30, right? So when it comes to trade stock, we use the market value to add in. So we're not going to use the value that you paid. So you may have bought stock for £10,000 for your shop, but the market value of that is actually 15,000. So you put actually 15,000 in there. So you always use the market value of the item. So just keep that in mind, that anything that's purchased with the intention of reselling, that would be classified as trade stock. Now, question for yourselves. I bought this chair because it was nice, I thought it looked good in the kitchen. Sat on it for a few days, didn't like it, so I put it on eBay. Is that trade stock?
No. Personal.
Sorry?
Personal stock.
Well, I've put it on eBay now.
He's selling it. For profit or loss, you don't know.
I bought it for 10, I put it for 30. Let's say.
So you got £20 profit.
So yeah, so even personal items, once you put them on market, they will turn into trade stock. So on the date that you're calculating zakat, if this is on eBay, let's say I put it on for £30, then I would have to count that in my calculations. So just keep that in mind as well. So another question for yourselves. I've already got one house, and I bought a second house, and the second house I am going to put it on rent. Do I have to give zakat on the value of that house?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes? Yes?
On the rentals, maybe.
On the rentals. On the rental income or the full value?
Rental.
So we've got both here.
Rental income profit.
Rental income profit. Yes, so the answer to that is, again, you bought the house, but you didn't buy it with the intention of reselling. You didn't put it on market to sell. So you will not give zakat on the value of that house. You'll only give zakat on the rental income that comes in, but that rental income will go into your cash side, so not necessarily your trade stock. Right? Similarly, if somebody, for example, has got a car hire company, they won't pay zakat on the value of all those vehicles, they'll only give zakat on the income that comes from the hire. Right? So just keep that. So the main thing to remember is, if it's on the market for sale, only then will it be zakat, only will it be in your zakat. Right? So an example of that would be, I purchased a house on auction for £20,000, whereas I know the market value of that is £100,000. So I thought, I'll buy it, I'll renovate it, and I'll put it on the market for £100,000. So that is where now I've purchased it and I'm going to sell it. So that then I will have to add the full value into my zakat. So for example, if at the time the market value is 100,000, I have to then add the 100,000. Shares, does anybody have any shares here? No, so we'll skip that part because I'm just wary of the time, inshallah. Pensions? Anybody want to know about pensions?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two types of pensions. One is the defined benefit scheme. So the defined benefit scheme is pretty much a pension which usually it's in kind of public service jobs, where what happens is you don't really have any control of it, you just opt in for it, and what happens is once you retire, you pretty much get a monthly wage. That's the defined benefit scheme. So there's no zakat on that type of pension. Whereas the other one is defined contribution scheme. That's usually private pensions where where you have control over where you're investing that into. So, for example, your employer might ask you, where would you like that invested? You say, okay, I want it into a Sharia compliant thing, or I want it in this, I want it in that. You usually have a little bit of control over that, even though you still can't access it until you retire, until the age of 55, but you pretty much have control over that. And usually this type of pension, what usually happens is, when you retire, you get a one lump sum payment, and then you usually get monthly payments. So that type of pension, you do have to give zakat on it. So you will have to calculate that in your annual calculation. So the date that you're calculating your zakat, you will see what the value of the pension is on that day, and you'll have to give zakat on that. But again, with that, there's an option. You can either pay the zakat each year, and when you finally retire and get the money, you use it as you please. Or the other option is similar to money owed to you. You just make a note each year, and then finally, when you retire and you finally get access to that money, then you can pay the zakat that was due over the years, and then keep the rest, basically. So that's pensions. There's a little bit more on pension, which I'll mention a bit later on. Crypto. Does anybody have cryptocurrencies or NFTs or tokens? No. Just in case you know people, tell them there is zakat on it. So just let them know that. So crypto is similar. So cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin, they're considered as currency, and so you calculate it into your kind of money aspect. And when it comes to NFTs and tokens, they're considered as items. So if you buy it with the intention of I just want to own an NFT or a token, then there's no zakat. But if you're buying it with the intention of reselling, that the price is going to go up in 3 months, so I'm going to sell it in 3 months' time, then it will be considered as kind of a trade stock. Do children have to give zakat? No. So this is wealth owned by a child. No? So there's a difference here between the scholars again. So according to the Hanafi school of thought, children do not give zakat irrespective of how much wealth they own. So if, for example, again, by children here we refer to Islamically a child, so a child who hasn't reached the age of puberty. So there's no zakat on their wealth. But according to the other 3 schools of thought, so, the Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi school of thought, even children have to pay zakat. So if a child has the nisab threshold, maybe you've been given a him or whatever it may be, then the zakat needs to be taken from that wealth and given. So again, whichever school of thought you follow, you can kind of do that. So that's all the additions that we've done. So that's everything that we've been adding up until now. Now comes to the liabilities part. What are we going to take away? What are we going to take off now? So liabilities, what we're going to take off first of all is any bill that is due on the day that we're calculating our zakat. So that may be your this month's rent, might be your this month's utility bills, might be your this month's council tax, whatever it may be. But only those that are due on that day. So you can't start adding up, I've got 6 months of rent still left on my contract, so I'm going to add. No. It's only those bills which are due on the date you're calculating your zakat. So you deduct all those from that total that you had already added up. Then you'll take away any debts that you have. Now when it comes to debts, there's 2 types of debts. One is a short-term debt, one is long-term debt. Short-term debt refers to any debt that needs to be paid within the next 12 months. So for example, I borrowed £3,000 from the brother, and I said to you, brother, I'll give it back to you in 10 months' time. So essentially within the next 12 months I have to give that total amount back to the person. So when it comes to short-term debts, you'll deduct the entire amount. So that full 3,000 I'll deduct from my additions that I had. When it comes to long-term debt, so this is things like mortgage or car finance or whatever it may be, where you're making monthly payments or where the payment needs to be made after, for example, 4 years, then what you would only deduct, the amount of payments that you will be paying for the 12 months. So my mortgage is £300,000. But on an annual basis, I'm only making repayments of £12,000. And even out of that £12,000, £2,000 is interest, and £10,000 is actually the payments. So I would only deduct the £10,000. We don't deduct the interest because interest is not a debt. Interest is a responsibility you've taken on yourself to pay the bank extra. So that's not classified as a debt. So the actual payment, the 12,000 I'm giving, 2,000 is interest, £10,000. So it's the 10,000 that I would deduct. Similar with car finance, if somebody has car finance, again, only the amount which is non-interest over the next 12 months, you deduct that. So that's how we're going to deduct the debts. So once we've done those deductions, then we see whatever is left. If it's above the nisab threshold, then I give zakat. So an example of that is, this is an example. So whether this is on the National Zakat Foundation website, without exaggeration, they probably have the best zakat calculator in the world, without exaggeration. So feel free to use that. I mean, it's got everything on there, including pensions. You can even select what type of pension, ISAs, and if you've got those, or cryptos, and even gold, and you can put the grams in, and it literally calculates everything for you. So you can use that to kind of calculate your zakat. But basically, this is the example that I put in onto that calculator. So what I own, I put in cash, gold, silver, and crypto. What I owe to others, or my liability, mortgage, personal loan, utility bill, and then I added my kind of figures in there, the things that I did, and it comes up with a full breakdown of exactly what it looks like for you for zakat. So when I calculated everything I had, 32,600 minus what I owed, 26,600, which left me with £6,000. Then it shows you exactly what the nisab is on that date that you calculated. So the nisab on the date I was calculating was 371.76 pence. So it's above the threshold, and then it gave me exactly what's 2.5% of that, £150. So that's the zakat that I need to give. By the way, this is just an example. I don't have to give money. So that's just as an example. But essentially, you can pretty much use that, and you have that at your kind of service disposal. So now coming on to where do we give our zakat? Now, when it comes to all school of thoughts here the scholars don't differentiate. All the scholars say that when it comes to zakat and sadaqah, and this is something you may have heard, charity starts at home. Right? And so all the scholars and all the schools of thought prefer that your donations go locally and then globally. Obviously, in the climate we live, individuals across the globe are in a lot more need sometimes than those even locally. So usually what I always say is that your zakat or your donations is split them. If you've got £100 of zakat to give, split it. Give some locally. For example, let's say give 10% locally, give 40% in one place, give 40% in another place, give 10% in another place. But try to distribute the zakat in a way that is best for your community as well, because we do have a responsibility to our local community. We know how the cost of living crisis is affecting the Muslim community in the UK, and in fact, one of the stats is that over 50% of Muslims in the UK are living in poverty. Over 50% live in poverty. Right? In fact, the organisation that put this presentation together, National Zakat Foundation, they focus on collecting zakat and sadaqah locally and distributing it locally as well within the UK. The latest is that every 3 minutes, somebody in the UK is reaching out to them for support. So you can imagine the need there is, right? So always when it comes to your zakat, we have to, as an ummah, we have to support our ummah globally, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Pakistan, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Turkey, whatever it is. But we also have a responsibility at home here. And sometimes it's a little bit disappointing that, alhamdulillah, our Muslim community in the UK is very, very generous. Does anybody want to take a guess? In the month of Ramadan, how much British Muslims donate each year? So we're not talking about the whole Muslims across the world. Just in the UK, Muslims in the UK, just in the month of Ramadan, how much we donate? Does anybody want to take a guess? How much, sorry? 200 million. Very large amount. We're talking about just the month of Ramadan. Any other guesses?
Over 50 million.
Over 50 million. 50 million, okay. Any other guesses? No? So alhamdulillah, according to the Muslim Charities Forum, every Ramadan, British Muslims donate approximately £150 million. £150 million every Ramadan. So alhamdulillah, the Muslim community in the UK is very generous. and there's a lot of wealth that is there to be distributed.
Because it goes to the right places.
But 99% of it goes abroad and places elsewhere, and very little of it is used to support our community here locally. Very, very little. In fact, the figures that we have, approximately about 120,000 people in need in the UK. And out of that, only about 24,000 are supported on an annual basis. So there's only 24% of Muslims in the UK actually being supported. It's because, you see, we see all the videos and things happening globally, and we see all the atrocities happening, but locally we sometimes don't see it. I mean, there was a case of a 70-year-old auntie, unfortunately, who moved into the UK many years ago, decades ago. Fortunately, she couldn't speak English. Husband passed away, they didn't have any children, and because of that she was on the streets. Imagine that at the age of 70, on the streets, nowhere to live, not a roof over her, can't access benefits because she doesn't know English. And so there's a lot of cases like that actually happen in the UK. So just keep that in mind when we're kind of calculating our zakat. I know we're towards the kind of last 10 days of Ramadan, but just keep that in mind when you are kind of looking at giving your zakat, inshallah. The last thing is that just, the purpose of this was to raise the awareness of zakat in itself, the fact that why it's so important within our deen, within our religion, it being a core pillar of the foundation of the deen. So inshallah, let's try to encourage others as well, and give information to others as well, so that we can use this as a means to uplift and keep the dignity of the Ummah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jazakallah khair. If there's any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. Any questions? If there's no questions, then next. Yes.
So if somebody sells their personal house, say after 10 years, so how does that work out?
So all you have to see is, on the day that you're calculating your zakat, is it on sale on that date? So if before the date you sold that house, let's say for £300,000, and then you bought another one for £310,000, for example, then it doesn't really matter. So you see, the main thing is just the date that is your zakat anniversary. That's the only date we're going to look at. On that date, just calculate what you have, what's on sale, and put that into your calculation. What's happened even a day before, or a month before, whenever, we're not going to take that into consideration. So
what about salary? You from salary you have a savings, but you only pay tax. Does it count as a? Some people say, okay, you only pay tax in this country because of the back home and back so much. So at that time there was no tax as such, but now because you salary, the tax will be deducted from that. Still you have to pay.
So the thing with zakat is that the Quran has stipulated specifically to whom zakat could be given. And unfortunately, the tax system in the UK doesn't come under that. So even though we do pay tax, and sometimes we get annoyed at paying tax, right? Some people pay, the tens of thousands in tax, but unfortunately that doesn't count as your zakat. So you will have to still give that zakat. That's obviously if you're above the threshold.
What about in Muslim countries?
Again, in Muslim countries, it's not really a zakat. It's not like a Baitul Mal that it was in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the government ministers would come and take the zakat. If there is a case of that, so for example, I don't know, I haven't lived in a Muslim country, but if there is, for example, the government come and deduct and say this is zakat. Actually, an example I'll give is a brother in one of the other masjids said that I have some cash in a bank account in Pakistan, and there the bank says that each year we will take your zakat out based on what's in that. So if that's the case, then yes, that's fine. But otherwise, usually any other type of kind of taxing system doesn't really classify as zakat.
Is the tax that we pay in a Muslim country, is that in contradiction with the zakat?
I think that's a completely separate subject to zakat. So if that's not zakat in itself, that's a kind of a taxing system.
Yes.
So whether that's in Sharia or not Sharia, that's something you can ask your local scholars. But no, it wouldn't count as zakat itself.
Well, some of that money would be spent on obviously in charitable programs of the government.
Yes, but it itself with zakat there's very specific stipulations of the calculations of it, the distribution of it. So it's something which is separate from that. Sorry, but you had it.
Well, I have a question regarding trade zakat. Like zakat university date is 5th of January, and I have £100, and 4th of January I can start £100, and I want to sell it. So just one day before, I have, for example, the selling worth of this stock is about say £500. So I have to give zakat on £500.
Yes. So you will calculate on the date that you're calculating. So on that 5th, if its value was £500, then you will have to.
And what about the stock which is just sitting there? I'm not able to sell it. It's just hoping maybe somebody will come and buy it, but it's just sitting on the shop.
So as long as it's on market, then you have to count that in because it is trade stock. Yes.
What about if someone's got a haram income? Is zakat due on that?
Good question.
So the traditional answer to that is haram income. The entire amount needs to be given into charitable cause. So that would be to answer that. So if somebody, so the ruling is that haram income a person cannot use for themselves, and so they have to give it into a charitable cause without the intention of zakat or sadaqah or anything.
So if a person owns a restaurant which is not alcohol licensed,
So there you have it. There it'll be different because majority of that business would be halal, and only a small percentage of it would be haram. So usually, what scholars say is as long as at least 75% of the business is halal, then you classify it as such.
the total amount is applicable.
Yes. So usually that's what scholars say, that you usually use the 75%.
Just one other question. If you bought some gold for the pure intentions of giving it to your children when they get married, and you keep it for less than more than a year or 2 years, is that zakat?
So so if you're following the Hanafi school of thought, yes.
Right.
If you're following the other three schools, then no. Unless you give the ownership to them, or you can keep it in your house, but they're the owners, then they'll have to pay zakat on it.
I mean, this under your control until until you give it to them when they get married. It's in your control.
Yeah. So yes, you will have to add it into your because it's belonging to you. But again, that's only if you follow the Hanafi school.
Yeah.
If you don't follow the Hanafi school, then no, because it's for personal use. It's not for kind of selling or trade.
So the example you gave earlier about people hiding money in the rails and things like that. I know it's their own personal money, but they didn't pay tax on it. So is that all zakatable? Yeah.
Yeah. So all of it will be zakatable. Yes.
Yeah, because it's his own money, isn't it?
Yes.
Just a slightly different question. Which relatives can he not pay zakat to?
Okay. So when it comes to relatives, the only relatives that you cannot give your zakat to is, first of all, husband and wife can't give to each other, and the other is basically your lineage above and below. So your father, grandfather, great-grandfather, similar, your son, your grandson, great-grandson. Otherwise, your brother, your sister, your uncles, aunties, you can give them zakat. It's just your kind of, basically your direct lineage you can't give it to.
Is it best to give zakat first to your own family, like people in the family,
So-
widows and things?
So the school of thought say locally first, but usually what I usually say is that first priority is your own family, even if they may be, for example, in Syria or might be in Pakistan or whatever. I usually say first priority is them, then locally, and then globally. And that's the reason why I usually say is split your donations. So if you've got £1,000 to give maybe 500 to your relatives, give 100, 200 locally, give 300, globally.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. That's usually the best way. Yes.
So, usually, especially in the case of a masjid, you can't give zakat to the masjid as, I can't remember the verse, but it just gives the 7 categories of who you can give zakat to. But it does say fi sabilillah. So is that under the category of that something that's like community services? That's why sometimes people do give that zakat to the masjid.
So when it comes to that, that's a question specifically for kind of somebody more senior to kind of figure whether. So when it comes to fi sabilillah, you have to look at the cause and you have to look at the reason it's there, and then you'll have to have some sort of authentication from a scholar to say that yes, this would classify as fi sabilillah, and only then do you give a zakat to that. But usually for masjids, zakat isn't eligible for masjids. But obviously if there's a specific masjid that's doing it in a specific way, a scholar has said that this would categorize as fi sabilillah, then yes, if you kind of trust that ruling. But usually zakat is more for the poor. So the 8 categories are in the Quran. Obviously there's a lot kind of more details. So some of them usually scholars don't apply to the UK, some various others. But majority will say that zakat is only to give for those who are in poverty, not necessarily the other categories. Again, that's a question which you can maybe put to National Zakat Foundation, and maybe they can come with the answer to that, or maybe actually your local scholars approach them and ask them whether this could be done. No other questions? Yes.
How do you determine somebody is entitled to zakat and whether your zakat is going to the right place? I know you said they're in poverty or they're poor, but how do you determine that?
So, according to the Sharia, anybody that doesn't own the amount of anybody that doesn't own the amount of the threshold amount, they pretty much would classify as eligible for zakat. But having said that, majority of charities would not use just that as a kind of something that's the only thing they look at. They usually then will look at, they might have, for example, all their basic necessities fulfilled, but there might be somebody else who has even their basic necessities not being fulfilled. So they'll usually always try to use it for those who are most vulnerable. But otherwise, according to Sharia itself, anybody below the nisab will be eligible for zakat.
Do they use this money when they're making water wells and things like that? Does the money go to that towards that as well?
No. Because the condition for zakat is that it has to be given to that poor person to use as they can. So only giving that ownership to the poor person is important. Okay, I'm aware that yes.
So this is a welfare country, and if someone is living here and paying the taxes, because the tax money is going to the poor people, and in form of benefits, and all the healthcare and everything, we still have to pay the zakat. Isn't it the same system in a better way?
No, unfortunately not. The whole concept of tax and zakat is two very different things.
How?
Sorry?
I think this tax system is much better organized as compared to the zakat system. There's no government that has implemented a proper system for zakat.
Well, the thing is that is there an actual Islamic state where they have that? Unfortunately not. But saying that the tax system is better than the zakat system, I would strongly disagree with that, because in the time of Rasulullah, actually even afterwards, the historians actually write that in the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, when he was the Khalifa, the zakat system was so strong that there was not a single person under his rule who was in poverty.
It was the past, but now show me one Islamic system using the zakat properly.
Well, if zakat is utilized properly, and if there is a state that's able to put that into implementation, I mean, even the UK, for example, were to suddenly start using the whole system of zakat, then it would be much better than their tax system, to be honest.
But now zakat
but when it comes to kind of looking at it from a perspective of rulings-wise, that when you're living in a non-Muslim nation, the tax that you pay them would not be classified as zakat, because that's not zakat, that's a tax.
I think the tax is a general pot, isn't it? And the
Yeah,
zakat is a specific pot.
Yes.
When you put money into a tax, then you don't know where it's going to go. So how can you
and hence I was saying earlier is that there's a specific category where zakat can go towards. And whereas tax, for example, you might give that zakat to, let's say you do want to consider your tax as zakat, that might go on a bomb falling on the Palestinians. Just give an example. And you can't say, oh yes, I fulfill my zakat, but essentially your zakat's been used to whatever.
Local council for a specific amount of tax, they send you the details that this much money was spent on the traffic lights, this much money was spent on the
And so
street
zakat,
lights.
zakat,
Everything, and we are, if I am paying, I strongly believe and I follow that, because I pay a high amount of tax and it is going to the wealthier and deserving people. So I think I should not take the extra money out.
Well, the zakat eligibility is based on the Shari'i eligibility. What the council, how the council looks at their eligibility will be very different. They might consider people who are not necessarily zakat eligible to be for support.
There's another distinction that zakat has to be administered by yourself, not the state.
Well, yes, so there is that you're responsible for giving your zakat. Yes, if you make somebody your kind of, usually we make the charities our
We choose to give it to.
yeah, so the charities usually act on our behalf.
Yes.
But otherwise it's our kind of personal responsibility for that. But I think that's a little bit different to what the brother's saying. But in terms of the ruling wise, tax was not considered as zakat. Yes, I'm just aware that obviously iftar is very soon, so Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a means of beneficial for us. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdihi, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakallah khair. Very informative. Thank you very much.